Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, episode 122.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of the Quacks of Quedlinburg Herb Witches expansion and Escape Tales Low Memory. We've got a 6-pack review of Tapestry, which we're putting on tap. I finally get to the hop segment that I promised you guys a long time ago, talking about what they add to beer. And we're asking in our final round, do games need to be balanced? So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
With a rich, unique, and storied, story.
I guess. I mean, that's pretty good for beer.
Look,
Not necessary, but pretty good.
And we are talking about Tapestry in our main feature. And we also have Escape Tales, which is a lot of story as well. We have got a, you know what? Sure, stories and unique storied histories and stories.
One of those things is for sure unique, and one of them has lots and lots of stories in it.
Hey, everybody, I'm trying my best, but welcome to this episode of Draft Mechanic. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for joining us. If you're a returning listener, thank you so very much as well. You can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or at Draft Mechanic on the social medias of the Bird, the Book, and the Gram. Yeah, the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
We've also got a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up for this episode, as there is for every episode. So if we're talking about something and you have an opinion you would like to share with the class, that is the place to do it.
Yeah, class.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do twice monthly board gaming meetups, one on the first Thursday of every month. So that means on November 7th, we'll be down at Good Road Cider Works, and we would love to see you there. And then we do one on the third Tuesday of every month at Salud Cerveceria. So if you are in the Noda neighborhood, that would be the place to come out, play some games.
Yeah, I'm not going to bother looking up that date. It's far enough away.
It's just before Thanksgiving, I think.
And also, if you are in the Charlotte or South Carolina or really any of the Carolinas area, we super encourage you to come hang out at Mega MooseCon that is coming up not this weekend, but next weekend. Well, no, actually, I guess this weekend for you listeners.
Yeah.
It's Sunday for us, so it's, you know what I mean, the 25th through 27th.
Yes.
You can go to megamoosecon.com, hit up the website there, and check out from information, get some tickets, sign up for some events.
Yeah, if you want a little bit more information on that, if you didn't listen to our last episode, we had an interview with Mark, who runs Mega MooseCon, and he had a lot more information to provide if you want either the backstory or a little bit more information about that event.
And if you want to hear Mark Kell's voice again, you're welcome to go back to that episode again. We don't mind an additional download on that particular episode, or any episode. Yeah, that's kind of all I got. Danielle, let's just roll right into it, because we've got some big, beefy games to talk about in the actual episode. So maybe you just hit us with the Kickstarter updates?
Well, maybe if you didn't have like 7 of them, this would be quicker.
It's not entirely my fault.
Let's go quick. Detective Smoke and Mirrors from Van Ryder Games finished at $250,975 of their $40,000 goal with 3,375 backers. Pre-orders are still available on their Kickstarter page, and for some reason you've written in the notes that I backed it.
Did you back it?
I did back it.
Haha.
I still need to fill out my survey, but I did back it.
Gotta fill out that survey. It's very important.
The Root, the tabletop RPG from Magpie Games, completed at $602,022 of their $10,000 goal with 6,495 backers. Dance Card from Cardboard Console, that's got an exclamation point at the end. That's why we say it like that, I guess.
Yeah.
$25,098 of their $20,000 goal, so that just squeaked by with 299 backers.
Squeak, squeak, squeak.
Camp Pinetop from Talon Strike Studios completed at $18,819 of their $15,000 goal with 657 backers. Arch Ravels from XYZ Game Labs completed at $107,928 of their $24,000 goal with 1,826 backers. Calico from Flat Out Games is funding at $110,000 of their $8,000 goal with 3,665 backers. This is ending on Thursday, November 7th, so I think 2 weeks from when this is airing.
Back it before you come over to game night.
All the cat spots are sold, so they went really, really fast. So you can't get your cat in the game anymore as of right now.
Ooh.
But there are still funding spots to get the game, obviously, because they're not limited. You can always get the game if it's available. That's great news for them that they're funding so well. We really love this game. I think we had a preview an episode or two ago. So
it was, three episodes ago.
If you are interested in that, go back to episode 109 or 110 and you can get that information.
Kitties.
And the Search for Planet X from Foxtrot Games is funding at $19,527 of their $13,000 goal with 498 backers. This is ending on Wednesday, October 30th. So quite quickly after this episode comes out, like a week and a half after this comes out. This was an awesome deduction game. We also had a preview of this in the last episode.
Yeah.
And I am really excited to see that they met their goal. This is a game that needs to happen.
Oh, yeah. It's happening, and it will be coming. But if you are a deduction games fan and you like logic, yeah, you need to get at the Search for Planet X. Totally true.
Okay, new projects now.
All right, it's my turn. Stretch. So first up, I have a game that is a RPG-ish project called Twain. This is coming from designer Jay Lee, and it is funding at $5,310 of its $5,000 goal with 129 backers. This one ends on Thursday, November 7th, with an estimated delivery of December for the standard edition or January for the deluxe edition. It's $18 for the standard book and $33 for the deluxe book. I'll talk about that in a second here. So Twain is a short, one-player, emotionally intensive LARP. The book that you get is a series of prompts encouraging you to kind of like write a fictional, magical lost twin a bunch of messages. Basically, the story behind it is you and a twin of yours, when you were young, grew up learning magic and performing magic together. And as you grew up, you obviously lost track of magic because you were playing yourself in this game, not a different person. And you were writing to a basically magical twin of yourself that continued on learning magic. You and the twin agreed to meet at a certain place in a certain time, much later in the future. And the game that you are playing of Twain will actually end with you playing out a live scene in a personally meaningful outside space. So basically, you're going to that place where you were promised to meet your twin, and your twin is not there. And that is what the performance is about. This one caught my eye for two reasons. One, it's a really unique concept, and I've been getting more into this kind of weird RPG space recently and looking at a lot of this stuff. And two, Travis Hill backed it, and I pretty much just like follow Travis Hill's advice on RPGs and off the center path RPG stuff. I did his chainmail letter writing RPG a few months ago. And actually, probably should be hearing about that, hopefully in the next few months when we finally get the thing. But anyway, Twain just looks like a really interesting project and the kind of thing that I would really encourage you to look into if you're interested in those kind of self-exploratory spaces that you can do in an RPG.
I'm not going to lie, this sounds like a therapy exercise.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be that, but we could all always use a little bit of therapy.
Now, what happens if you go to the place that you're supposed to do this solo LARP thing and your twin is there?
Then we've discovered a lot of very weird magic. Maybe that's what Twain is, to finally discover an actual magical twin.
Oh, no.
But the standard book is a nice hardcover book with really good pages for you to, it's like perfect, it's like designed to be written in and played around with a lot. The deluxe edition obviously has more deluxe components, so you get some additional stuff. I encourage you to go, again, check out the page there.
So it's a workbook, right?
Yeah, it's like the standard book is kind of like a 5x8 portrait size book,
Yeah.
It looks like, but the art looks really good, the design looks really good, and apparently this designer has done a lot of very interesting RPG stuff in the past. So if this sounds like it's up your alley, I would really encourage you to go check out Twain. Next up, from Kids Table Board Games, I have Fossilis. And that's not a typo, there is an extra I there, so don't search for fossils. Well, I mean, search for fossils in the game, but not like if you're searching for the game on Kickstarter. Anyway, this is currently funding at $54,000 of its $13,000 goal with 1,439 backers. This one ends also on Thursday, November 7th. I guess that's a date for a lot of Kickstarters to end, with an estimated delivery of August 2020, so Gen Con-ish. You can back it for $40, and this is a family-weight game from Kids Table Board Games about digging for dinosaur fossils. The hook of this one, to me, is kind of the presentation and the setup and the game board itself. The game board is this kind of 3D tray. If you kind of think of like Santorini, how it's got that 3D base in there, and then you have a bunch, you have like a 5x5 grid of pockets that you're going to be sprinkling these little plastic fossil and rock hammer bits into. And then you're going to put a lid on it, shake it up, put this little ground divider in, put some tiles on top of it, and reveal the whole board there. So you're going to have a bunch of these square terrain tiles covering all the holes. You don't know exactly what's in all of the holes. And in the game, you're going to be moving around, digging up the dirt, digging up the terrain, lifting those square tiles off, revealing the holes underneath, and then finding the tiles, or the the fossil tokens inside each of the holes.
That feels a little bit like Magic Labyrinth that came out a little while ago, where you had
Okay,
the
yeah.
dividers underneath of 3D board and you had to move around.
Yeah, similar kind of thing where you're kind of hiding information underneath the board and then having a little bit of randomness in there, and then you're going to be searching around for stuff as well. It's kind of a fun little thing like this. It also comes with tweezers, which is great because you got to tweeze out the little fossils out of the tiny little holes.
And if you hit the edge, the guy's nose lights up?
No, but then in addition to that, you're going to be doing the kind of standard stuff you would expect in a family weight game. You're going to be collecting resources. You're going to be using those resources to buy cards. You can buy some additional skills that allow you to move differently or manipulate things differently. I really think that the presence or the table presence of this is going to be a big selling point. And Kids Table does such a great job of doing family weight games with a good depth of strategy that if you are somebody that has a family and you want to have something fun, unique with a fun little twist on it, I think this one is worth checking out.
Now, this sounds like it's more for sort of the younger age kids. If you have some older, like tweens or whatever, this is probably going to be a little bit too simple for them, right?
I don't know particularly because you got to go into a whole bunch of extra clicks if you want to get at the rule book, because that's how Kickstarters work these days. But knowing Kids Table, I'm going to guess that it's the kind of stuff that will appeal to a younger crowd than your usual kind of family weight game. But I expect that there's probably a good bit of strategy and probably bits you can take in and out to change the complexity of it as well. Okay. We've seen a bunch of other things from them. Problem Picnic, Ants Thingy, and then there was that other one where we were flicking. No, that was Problem Picnic where we were throwing stuff.
Yeah, you were throwing the
that
discs.
was fun. Yeah, that was the end of a long, long night. So yeah, if you are interested, Fossilis is on Kickstarter through the 7th of November. Not the end, the beginning, the middle of November.
The 7th.
Third up in Kickstarters, I have Cosmic Colonies from Floodgate Games. This one has just crossed its funding goal with $17,000 of its $15,000 goal, 429 backers, and this one ends on Thursday, October 24th, with an estimated delivery of May 2020. You can back it for $39. I'm going to give you the buzzwords: polyominoes, resource gathering, worker card selection. Hooray! Also space and good art, and Scott Alms is a designer. So that's something a lot of people all like, those different buzzwords. The thing that is interesting about this one to me is that the way you are using this worker selection, you have a few different worker cards in your hand. It looks like there's 40 total worker cards in the game, so you have a lot of different variability in terms of those. When you play a worker card, it goes to your neighbor. So every round of the game, as you use these workers to take actions, you're going to constantly have this stuff rotating around the board, so that you have to not only choose the actions that's best for you, but also be aware that any action you choose is going to go to your neighbor for them to use on a subsequent turn. I like that kind of mechanic. I think it's a good way to bring a novel kind of interaction into a game like this.
So kind of like Onitama, where you want to make sure you don't leave something really excellent for the next player.
Yeah, exactly. And basically what it looks like you're doing, you're grabbing these polyomino tiles off of a center board, you're placing them onto your own personal terrain board to cover up different areas of the terrain that you are mining and or getting stuff from. Then you get resources, you build buildings, you have a little bit of an engine, and I'm guessing at some point you get victory points as well.
One would think.
Yeah.
This is a game, after all.
Yeah. Floodgates had a pretty good track record recently. Obviously, we really enjoyed Bosk. We enjoyed Sagrada. And it's exciting to see them having more games, some more known designers, and have some unique mechanisms in here like this card passing thing. So I think it's definitely worth taking a look at. You got a little bit of time left to look at this one, too, if you are interested. But only if you're listening to this in the first few days that this episode comes out, because October 24th is the end of the road for this Kickstarter project.
Yeah, that's
A little more dire than I wanted it to be.
just a few days after.
Yeah, so if you're interested, go check out Cosmic Colonies, also on Kickstarter, through Thursday, October 24th.
All right, let's get to games that are
I'm so excited. Give me that bump music.
Want to wear your Draft Mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draftmechanic for t-shirts.
All right, first up in recent plays is an expansion. Not a full game, but we're playing it with a full game. You can't just play expansions by themselves. That's
Sometimes
not how it works.
I'm looking at you, the New Time Stories arc.
Okay, expandalones. We call them expandalones.
But that's not what we're doing here.
Oh, geez. Hey, everybody, we're in the weeds, and it's time to get back into the game. So I'm going to tell you the facts about the Quacks of Quedlinburg, the Herb Witches, which is an expansion that came out in 2019 from Schmitz Spiele and North Star Games. This plays 2 to 5 players, now 5 players, in 45 minutes. It's designed by Wolfgang Warsch with art by Dennis Lohausen. This is a game of luck pushing, bag building, and herb witching.
So the Herb Witches expansion is going to add a couple of new things to the Quacks of Quedlinburg, but I guess we should start talking about what the Quacks of Quedlinburg is. The Quacks of Quedlinburg is a bag building game where on each round you are going to be pulling tokens out of a bag that you have in front of you and placing them out into your pot, trying to get as many of the positive ingredients as you can before you reach your threshold of the cherry bomb ingredients, which are going to cause your pot to explode if you pull too many of them out. Once you either cause your pot to explode or decide to stop before that happens, you are going to then use the resource or the money that you have earned by how far along the track of your pot you are to gain new resources, put them into your bag. You'll also get some points if your pot didn't explode. And you are going to do this over the 9 rounds of the game. Whoever has generated the most points through what they have pulled out of their bag throughout the entire game at the end is going to be the winner of the Quacks of Quedlinburg. It is a very simple, very fun game that we talked about, I believe, at the very beginning of this year.
Yeah.
And it was definitely on at least my top of 2018 for our Redux list.
Same.
So this is a game that we have very much enjoyed. So what does the Herb Witches add?
Herb Witches.
It does add Herb Witches, but I'm first going to say it adds a 5th player, which you had already mentioned. It adds a set of, I think it's a black player pieces that you can add. So now you can play this with 5. It also adds a new ingredient, which is called Locoweed, which you can play with, and it just adds some new tweaks to what the ingredients can do. It is very much reliant on the ingredients around it. The interesting thing about the ingredients in the Quacks of Quedlinburg is each of them has different rules for how they're going to give you either points or possibly rubies, which are a resource that you can use to increase your starting position or to buy back your safety net, which is your flask of non-exploding potion or whatever. And each of the ingredients has a different set of rules. The base game came with 4 sets for each of the ingredients. The expansion comes with another 2 sets of rules for each ingredient. It comes with 2 sets of rules for the Locoweed, which obviously didn't have the 4 original sets because it wasn't in the base game. And it takes your pumpkin token, which in the previous game was really kind of a filler. There was 1 set of rules for, I think it was the mushroom, that counted how many pumpkin tokens you had already pulled out. But mostly the pumpkin was just a single value. It didn't really affect anything in any way. It was just something you could pull out of your bag to move yourself further along. Well, in the expansion, they've added not only the 1 value pumpkin, which will allow you to move 1 space along on your cauldron, but they've added a 6 value pumpkin. The values of the tokens are how much farther from the last token placed you can place it. So a 6 value pumpkin is very good because normally you only have 1, 2, and 4 value tokens. So this is a very expensive, very valuable, very big pumpkin. I assume it's the pumpkin we saw at the Minnesota State Fair.
Yes.
A couple of, what was that, last month? I think that was only last month.
It was a gigantic gourd.
It was 900 pounds.
Ginormous.
So that's your 22 value pumpkin. So it's adding that in. But it also adds, like we mentioned earlier, the Herb Witches. These are going to be 3 sets of Herb Witch cards that you're going to pull 1 of each of at the beginning of each round, and that's going to be your Herb Witches for the game. So you've got your sort of green-hatted Herb Witch, your blue-hatted Herb Witch, and your red-hatted Herb Witch. And you'll have 1 of each every round, but you're never going to, well, you will sometimes have the same combination, but you're not going to have the same combination every game. These are each going to give you a special power that can be used at a different point in the game. One, I believe, is during the preparation phase when you're pulling stuff out of your bag. One can be affecting the buying phase, and there's one that I think is variable around the other different parts. Each player at the beginning of the game, if you're playing with the Herb Witches, starts with a gold, a silver, and a copper witch coin. That means that you can use each of the witches exactly once, because when you use the witch power, you pay the coin that is designated on that card, 1 for each of the different 3 types, to the witch. If you don't use the witch power, that coin is worth 2 points at the end of the game. But if you use it, these are pretty strong powers that most of the time are going to be worthwhile using. But you can't use each one more than once. And you can see which other ones people have used, what position they're in, like, oh, there's one witch that allows you to sort of unexplode yourself. And if you see that witch is out, but Jake's already used it, then you can keep track of that. So those are the main things that the Herb Witches expansion adds. It's not a huge change to the base game, but it is a bunch of new stuff. How did you like it?
Super liked it. I really enjoyed pretty much everything that this added. Like, of the different pieces, I think the one we're going to use the least is the 5th player.
I don't know. I mean,
but like the other stuff, I don't think I would need to play without. Like, I for the most part enjoyed the new piece, what's the word I'm looking for? The books for the pieces, the 5th and 6th different
The
options
rule
for
sets, yeah.
the different rule sets. They were interesting, and I feel like I'd like to just kind of look at all the different sets and see what randomizes in better. At this point, I'm kind of wondering, do I want to just play with like everything is on set 6, or do I want to start mixing and matching on those?
Well, of the two, we played all of set 5 and we played all of set 6. I really liked 5 better than 6. I think 5 had a little bit more interaction between the tokens that you pull out.
Yeah.
The rules for set 6 were more dependent on the other tokens, but they weren't as interactive. I enjoyed 5 because when I pulled a token, I was like, okay, what else have I pulled? How is this affected by what I've already done this round? And I think 5 was a really good rule set. 6 was also fine, but it wasn't as good to me as 5.
I think the thing I was most surprised about that is that I don't think anybody bought a giant pumpkin in both of those games.
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did. I never pulled it.
Okay, so it's an expensive pumpkin.
It's 22
also
coins,
6.
yeah.
But there was some item in the set of rule set 6 that allowed me to add 3 to a number 4, so I had a 7. That was the biggest thing that I could see.
Yeah,
So-
I think in the rule set for book 5, there was something that allowed you to move a token out by the value of, I think it was the mangrove. You could move something out by the value of the mangrove. So if you had a 4 mangrove and you pulled it out right before a 6 pumpkin, it was going to give you a huge spread. Again, you had to do that exact thing, and it was very unlikely. But if you did it, that would have been really cool and really fun.
Yeah.
I agree with you. This is definitely the kind of thing where you don't need to take it out. If you are still perfectly happy with the first 4 rule sets and you don't want that additional witch power thing, I don't think you necessarily need to buy this, but I'm really glad that we have it, and I'm definitely not going to take it out of the box.
I agree. The witch powers, for example, I used 2 out of 3 of them, the 2 games we played, and I think that's a good level. I never felt like I had to use them all the time, but I felt like they gave me a good opportunity to mitigate a turn that wasn't as great, which was honestly one of my biggest frustrations with the base game, is that you can get a turn where you're just totally screwed. It is possible to pull all of your white pieces first, and then you're just kind of like, well, I've got these amazing chains of other pieces. It's round 7, but I guess I'm just getting a crappy pull right now. And the herb witches, they definitely gave me things to mitigate some of my worst pulls.
They also changed the flavor of the game a little bit. Like, there was one herb witch that we played with in our second game of this, where you could, if you landed or you finished your pot spiral on something that would give you a ruby, which they are scattered among the tiles that you stop on, you could spend your witch coin and gain the number of rubies equal to the number of points you were getting for that space. So it encouraged you to use it when you had a really good turn and you had gone all the way up. But did you stop because you were on a ruby? Or did you keep pulling because you've had a really good turn and you can get more points and you can get more buying value? So not only did that make you think in a way that the normal game doesn't, but it also brought a major influx of rubies into the game. And like I said, rubies are another resource in the game, and you can spend them to start farther ahead or to bring back that potion that allows you to save yourself and put a token back in if you've pulled something you don't like. So it did really change the way the game was, because normally you don't have that many extra rubies to spend. They're a fairly rare resource in the base game. But in that game, like, I think you had gotten 5 or 6 of them at one point when you used your witch coin.
It was huge.
And I know everybody in that game used that particular witch coin. So we all had a whole bunch of rubies, and it was really interesting to see how that game played a little bit differently, when every round you could be like, oh yeah, I'll bump myself up a little bit. It's fine. And you're starting and you have a lot more. That reminds me, one thing I did not mention that it added is that it has added the overflow bowl, which was something, when we played the game originally, there is a limit to how many spaces there are on the spiral of your cauldron. And if you reach the end of it, there wasn't really anything beneficial to continuing to pull. Whereas now with the overflow bowl, if you continue to pull tokens, you're going to receive half the points of the value of anything in your overflow bowl. So they did give you a way to continue to capitalize if you've got a really strong bag built, or you're just having a really lucky pull and all of your cherry bombs are still in the bag. So I think that's really neat. And it was really interesting to see how the game can change in flavor when, either you're moving way up because you've got these really valuable pumpkin tokens or whatever, or you're moving up because you have these rubies that are being injected into the game's economy through the herb, which I think it added a lot of interesting variability in a game that already has quite a bit of variability.
Yeah, I agree. I had the chance to use the Overflow Bowl once, and I felt like I only got 1 point out of it, but it was still like neat. It was kind of really interesting to have that. Oh, okay, here's something extra. I like when you have expansions like that what it adds is something a little extra, something that you get to use some of the time, but you don't have to use all of the time. And that's something that I really appreciate about this game's design, is that you can really kind of go in a bunch of different directions depending on what your setup currently is and which pieces you choose to take.
The other thing that it does is not only does it get rid of a little bit of a rub the wrong way point, which was that when you get to the end, there was nothing for getting to the end, or nothing beyond getting to the end. I think there was a point boost that you got for getting to the end, but you didn't get anything for being able to continue to pull. Well, they got rid of that. That's excellent. But also, some of the new rule sets that they've given for the books 5 and 6 allow you to place things later on in the turn. So if you've got stuff that you've saved up, now there's something that happens when you place it at the end. So if you've been saving tiles aside because you had, I think it's the red tokens.
The red ones allow you to pull a token, you set it aside, and then you place it at the end or when you want. But you have to place it eventually.
You do have to place it. So this allows you to be able to do that, because otherwise, when you say you have to place it, if you had gotten to the end in the original game, you couldn't actually place it. But here, if you're saving something up, you can be like, oh, I'll save it up and I'll throw it in the overflow bowl and I'll get points for it. So I think that really worked well together.
Yeah. Yeah, I really got to say, if you are a fan of Quacks and you've been playing it a lot, this is kind of a no-brainer expansion to get when it hits retail. I think actually just in the last few days, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to pick up a copy of this at Gen Con. And just like, it's really one of those, why would you not kind of expansions? If it is a game that you really enjoy, if you really enjoy Quacks, there's no reason to not have it. And because you get to add in that 5th player if you really want to. This is a game that definitely wouldn't hurt from an additional player, because you don't have a lot of downtime if you're all pulling together.
Yeah, a lot of this is simultaneous action, so it doesn't feel long with a bunch of people. Cool. You just do your scoring at the end of each round.
And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be seeing that other Wolfgang Warsch game. What is that? Tavern of Tiefenthal? So, it's kind of a similar weight to Quacks from what I understand, also coming from North Star. So really excited to see what Wolfgang is doing with these bigger games. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so the Herb Witches expansion for the Quacks of Quedlinburg, as I understand it, is available now.
All right, next we're going to be talking about the follow-up to a game that we were very excited about last year. Not an expansion like this one just was, but the follow-up. And this is Escape Tales Low Memory, which is a 2019 release from Board and Dice. It plays some players, I would suggest probably 2 to 4, in 3 sessions of 2 to 4 hours each. The designers are Jacob Caban and Bartosz Ijakowski, and the artists are Magdalena Klopacz and Jacob Facianowski. This is a Black Mirror-esque narrative-driven escape room-style game, and it is unlike anything else, I think.
Well, it's kind of similar to Escape Tales The Awakening.
I mean Escape Tales.
Yes.
You know what I mean.
Okay, first off, no spoilers.
No, obviously not.
We're not going to spoil this for you because we want you to play this thing very badly. Second off, this is a review from a prototype copy that we got from Board and Dice back at Gen Con. Philippe from Board and Dice knows how obsessed we are with this. So he actually got us a print-and-play version of it at Gen Con, and then we had to print out a few extra cards, and holy moly.
It was worth it, though.
I'm not waiting for this.
So worth it.
But let me give you the basic foundation of what Escape Tales is. If you heard us talk about Escape Tales The Awakening, this is an escape room style game. It is a narrative-driven, card-based game that was designed by people who actually design escape rooms and are really just kind of bringing their puzzle designing knowledge to this kind of board and card and paper space. In Escape Tales The Awakening, you're working through this one long story. Basically, you're a father that is going into a special world in some way to kind of figure out what's going on with his daughter who's fallen into a coma. We talked a lot about how the story in that one was very dark and could be, kind of important for you to be aware of some of the more sensitive topics. This one is still pretty heavy, thematically. It is definitely on the par with something you would see on an episode of Black Mirror, which is, I think, a really good comparison. It does have that kind of heaviness and also that near future technological question to it. There's a few other things in there that you do kind of want to be aware of going into it, that if you do have, I don't even really know how to discuss this because I don't want to give away story points.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I would just say don't play this with small children.
Yeah, don't play it with small children, and do be aware that there are some heavier thematic things going on in here.
Yeah, that being said,
yeah.
I don't think this game would play very well with small children.
No, very true. It's a very dense puzzle.
Yeah, they're good, strong puzzles in this game. Mm-hmm. So your average 6-year-old is not going to be able to solve these.
So in The Awakening, it was one giant story. We took it about 6 hours over 2 sessions. Basically, you have a card in front of you that tells you the location, shows you the room that you're in, and gives you different points in that room that you can place an action token on to go into a storybook. And then in that storybook, you are reading passages that tell you to draw cards or interact with the stuff in certain ways. You draw the cards, and you're using the cards to solve puzzles. I think if you look at the way Unlock works, it's kind of a similar thing where you have cards and you have to learn the puzzle and interactions between them. Unsurprisingly, in Escape Tales, there are a bunch of different ways the puzzles are presented and puzzles are solved, but everything is pretty much managed through this app, which is a website that you can go to. And the thing that we really enjoyed about Escape Tales The Awakening is the way that there wasn't any kind of penalty or scoring, and they do give you the amount of hints that you need, and there's no timer, so you are really allowed to explore as you want rather than being pressured to explore quickly or in a certain time or, zapped with a buzzer if you do something terribly wrong.
Well, you are still pressured to explore quickly, but in terms of in-game time, not necessarily out-of-game time.
The other thing that's interesting about the Escape Tales series is also that as you progress through the game, you're going to be making choices that will stick with you throughout the game, and both of these have a bunch of different endings. I think The Awakening had 7 different endings, depending on the choices you made and things you collected, and Escape Tales Low Memory definitely has a bunch of different endings. And this is not a spoiler per se, but I also kind of want to also bring out the point that Escape Tales Low Memory also has a bunch of divergence during the story. I know that there's a bunch of puzzles we never got to because the app keeps tracks of what puzzle you do. And there's definitely different paths you can take throughout this that will give you different parts of the story. So while we went through this over maybe a 9 or 10 hour session split across 3 days, I feel like we could go through this again and get different context and get some different pieces and maybe even learn different parts of the story.
Yeah, that being said, we've mentioned that this is 3 individual stories, which are all connected through a larger arc, obviously. They're not going to give you 3 completely different stories in the same box, but each story has its own divergent ending point as well. I don't think that's a huge spoiler to say you can end each story different ways.
Yeah, very true. And then the way that you end each of the 3 stories will impact some of the stuff you have going into the next story. And it's a really just interesting connection there. I think that splitting this up into 3 different session storybooks actually helped a lot because this is a much bigger puzzle overall. And there's a lot of different things you have to really keep track of. And giving us that really nice clean break 3 times allowed us to split this up and play it over 3 different days, which probably made it a lot easier for us to keep track of what was going on in each of the sessions rather than us having to remember something that happened in session 1 for session 3, which in Escape Tales The Awakening, as one long session, there were definitely fewer breaking points, so to say.
That being said, this has the same really good save system, I guess, that they had in The Awakening, where they tell you exactly, or they have you a place to write down exactly what you have and what cards you have and what information is available to you. So if you do need to stop in the middle of the 4-hour session, because, life happens, maybe it's very late and you realize that now is not the time to try to solve this really intense puzzle, or you just have to go somewhere or whatever, you can stop and write down, and it will be kept in a way that when you go back to it makes sense. Because we did have to use the save system for The Awakening when we played through it, obviously, because you said we played through it in 2 different 3-hour sessions. And when we went back, even though it was substantially later, it wasn't like the next day, we were able to look at it and be like, oh, okay, here's what we had, and take everything out of the box and immediately get back to playing.
Yeah.
So if you do need to break this up into smaller sessions, you can do that.
Another new piece that I really appreciated about the way low memory works is that there are puzzles that will be parts of grander puzzles in this. It adds a new kind of token rather than your action tokens that you're using to go explore different places of the rooms. You will get the progress tokens, which, for example, we had one puzzle that was 4 different puzzles, and as we completed each of them, we put a progress token on another puzzle, and then once you get all of those puzzles unlocked, then obviously you go on to whatever that next part is. I think that that's a really smart way to handle that, rather than having just a card of, oh, you need to have done other things to make this happen, such and such.
That being said, though, all the puzzles in low memory were contained within a single space. It was a little bit more like an escape room in that way, whereas in The Awakening, you might need something from 2 rooms ago to be able to solve a puzzle here. Now, it might not be an absolutely essential puzzle, but if you were looking to solve this puzzle, you would have need to have gotten something several rooms ago. In low memory, everything for each puzzle was contained within the space which it was taking place in, and you were able to always have access to all the things you needed to solve the puzzles, which made me a little bit more confident in what we were doing with the puzzles.
Yeah, and boy, am I glad that the puzzles exist in a space that you don't have too much stuff floating around. I have a feeling that if we had had more pieces and it hadn't told us to discard certain cards at times, we would have gotten even more confused by some of these puzzles, because some of these are really some thinky puzzles. We spent probably 45 minutes on the last puzzle, for example, just kind of like looking at it from a bunch of different ways. And there were a number of puzzles in this that were like, you just got to think about it, and you got to turn it left and right and kind of look at it upside down, and mentally, obviously, also physically, because, you know, what good escape room doesn't do stuff like that?
Okay, let's talk about the puzzles for a minute. I think the first thing to say about these is definitely that you are going to need pen and paper to solve these puzzles. I don't care how good you are at puzzles. You're not going to be able to solve these just in your head. They have a lot of things that you're going to need to manipulate in different ways, and you are going to need pen and paper.
Oh, and I should also say, by the way, there is no destruction in the components in this, which is very important to state in any kind of escape puzzle game, that there's no destruction. You can replay this as many times as you want.
Yeah, I mean, unless you just decide to destroy it.
Unless you get really mad and throw the box across the room because you didn't get that solution.
Don't do that. But yeah, these are puzzles that you're going to require some notes to do, and that is why I said sort of at the beginning, 2 to 4 players is what I would recommend with this. We play them with 2, and I think that's a really good number because it allows everybody to see the pieces of the puzzle. If you play with more than 3 or at most 4, you're going to have a lot of people sort of elbowing in trying to see the puzzle, and because it is a series of thinky puzzles, you can't just look at it once and be like, oh, yeah, that's it. That's what it is. And then wait 3 seconds and have somebody else do it.
Yeah.
It is something that you're going to need to look at the information you're being provided with.
And definitely later in the game, I was writing down entire puzzles and just straight transcribing the cards because I had to just draw a bunch of lines and circles and dots. And oh boy. I will say, so there are 1 or 2 puzzles in here that straight up stumped us. And one of them took we just spent way too long looking at it. We definitely used the solve it for me button because we were on a completely different track at points.
Yeah, the way the puzzles are in the app or on the website, however you want to describe it, you can get a series of hints. I think there are 3 hints for each puzzle if you use the hints. And on most of the puzzles, we did use them a couple of times, the hints. On most of the puzzles, the first hint is something, if you didn't understand it, you were nowhere near solving the puzzle. It's like, here's the general direction you should be going in.
Yeah.
And then you got 2 a little bit more specific hints as to how you needed to work with the puzzle to solve it. There was one puzzle in here where even after getting all 3 hints, I still really don't feel like the 3rd hint gave us the right direction. I think it sent us in the wrong direction, honestly. Yeah. So there was one puzzle that was frustrating. That being said, you can just, if you find yourself really frustrated, you can say, okay, give me the answer. But that's not fun.
It's not fun, and it does kind of leave a bad taste in my mouth. But one thing I do really appreciate about Escape Tales in general is that when I use the hints, I'm not penalized it in a story sense. Like, obviously, I'm going to feel like, oh, well, I should have got that. But there's no, like, storyline penalization for using hints. Or
you don't take 5 minutes off the timer.
Yeah,
or whatever.
exactly.
There is no timer.
It doesn't impact the narrative, which is super, super important to me in a game like this. With your permission, I'd like to step out of the board game world to talk about another scenario in which that helps. Is that okay? The video game Celeste, which is a game that I am super, super obsessed with. I think it's a fantastic game. It has this assist mode in it that allows you to kind of change the way the game works. Celeste is a super, super challenging platformer, the kind of game that I really would never play, but the assist mode allows you to change like death or number of jumps you have or stuff like that.
Allows you to change death.
It allows you to change death, but I would not have played Celeste had I not known that the assist mode was there. And also, the assist mode does not impact the story in that game. And I feel like the story is so critically important in Celeste that if it had impacted in some way, it's like at the end of the game, it's like, oh, yeah, you don't get the good ending because you did, one level on 50% speed. Even though, all of that, there were options to experience that narrative. It's kind of a similar thing in Escape Tales here. It gives you options to solve the narrative if something is way over your head. And that is such an interesting way to deal with an escape room kind of game. You get a lot of good, rewarding feelings out of solving things, but if you don't solve something or if something isn't, perfectly accessible to you, like let's not even talk about color blindness issues yet because, oh boy, color.
We will get to that, yeah.
But it allows you to still experience that narrative. And this is a game that super, super is, I feel like the narrative is super rewarding. You get a lot of, I don't want to say like happiness out of experiencing the narrative because it is a very dark narrative, but I feel like the narrative is as rewarding as solving the puzzles, right? So you know what I mean? It's well constructed.
It is a well-constructed narrative. I definitely got a lot more enjoyment out of solving the puzzles than out of the narrative.
Very good puzzles.
I will say, though, in addition to the hints that you can get, the fact that the app will tell you how much information you need to solve each puzzle was also really helpful. And this is, again, a carryover from The Awakening, where you can hit a button on each puzzle and it'll say, this requires 2 puzzle cards and a location card, or this requires 3 puzzle cards, or whatever. So you can see if you have all the information to solve something, which I think is really useful, because otherwise you are going to be wasting your time tokens, because you do have essentially time tokens, because every time you go somewhere, you place a token out onto the map, and you'll be wasting stuff if you think that you're looking for something that you're not looking for just because you can't really figure out this puzzle. If you know you have everything, you can work with what you have. So I like that as well, but I'm not gonna give them a pass. There was one puzzle that I do think is a little bit.
And the hints didn't help in the way that they should have.
Yes.
But we just got the answer to that one, moved on, and had a really rewarding time.
Clearly, I haven't entirely moved on.
Let us mention briefly the accessibility. This is a super, super thinky game, so you're not going to be able to play this with everybody.
You shouldn't play this with children anyway.
Yeah, and at the same time, super important that you work with people that are willing to accept other people's ideas and viewpoints as well, because I feel if you and I didn't understand that, like, you're way better at one kind of puzzle, I'm way better at another kind of puzzle, if you get people like that, they're like, no, this is the only way to look at it, you're going to have some trouble. Additionally, this is a super visual game, so if you have color blindness issues, you're probably going to have some trouble with some of the puzzles.
No, you are 100% going to have some trouble with at least, I can think of 2 puzzles in this game that are largely color-based.
Yes.
And there's just no way around that. There isn't really a way to solve this if you cannot see the colors in some of these puzzles.
On the plus side, there is a way around it. You can just skip that puzzle, which
you could just skip that puzzle.
Kind of nice. I like that there is that trapdoor there available.
Most people are probably not going to play in a group that is entirely colorblind, so that is something, but that's not a pass either. Like, this is a game that you need somebody with at least one person with good vision to be able to play.
Yeah. Do you have anything else that we can say about this? I don't think there's a whole lot more we can say about this rather than going into specific mechanics of puzzles, other than that they were super good and super rewarding, and the story, which I thought was very interesting and well done. It looks like it had a lot of divergence. Is there anything else we can really say?
I want to wait like a month or two until my brain forgets exactly how I solved these puzzles, or you solved these puzzles. Or actually, some of them I don't even really understand how they were solved, because we've talked about this a bunch of times. People are good at different types of puzzles.
Yeah.
And there are definitely puzzles that I looked at and I was like, oh, this is how we do it. Or there are ones that you looked at and before I even had written down what was on the card, you're like, oh, yeah, this is how you solve it. And you explained it to me, and I'm like, I still don't understand what you're saying. So it's really good to have people who can think of puzzles differently. But I'd like to wait until we forget how these puzzles work a little bit and play through it again, because there are enough points of divergence that I think we could get a different narrative if we played through this again.
I agree. Think of all the new puzzles. So exciting.
Such puzzles.
One thing I will say in conclusion, I'm sure that there are people out there on the internet that are going to ask me, should you play of The Awakening or Low Memory, which one is better? And I want to just make a clear statement right now. They're both the best, and you should play both of them.
Low Memory. You should play Low Memory. I mean, they are both very good.
Yeah.
But I think if you are going to get into this series, Low Memory is a better place to start.
I guess.
If you play Low Memory and you, like we, are absolutely in love with it, then I think you should go back and play The Awakening. They are both really good games. But I think if you don't know what you're in for, Low Memory is a better place to start. It's broken up a little bit better.
Okay.
And it is a slightly lighter theme. I will say slightly lighter. Neither of them is going to be a children's television show.
At the same time, I kind of want to tell people to do Awakening first, because some of the things that I'm not going to mention that are in Low Memory play with what your expectations were after playing The Awakening.
Oh,
Specifically,
that's fair.
things I'm not going to talk about.
I know what you mean.
I don't know. I feel like everybody should play both these games. I think they're freaking fantastic. And if you're okay with some more mature themes, yeah, you're going to get a lot out of them.
They're also like both super low price point, right?
Yeah, I think The Awakening was like $27 or $30.
It was sub $30, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what Low Memory is going to be at?
I don't know yet, but I'm sure it'll be about the same. It's not significantly more in terms of components. You have you got the 3 books instead of the 1 big book. So, probably, I assume it's going to be somewhere in that 25 to 40. But I would pay any amount. No, not any amount. I would pay either of those amounts. All right. Well, Escape Tales Low Memory, super high recommendation. There is no doubt that this is going to be at least top 3 of the year for me. Unless miracles occur in terms of games, it's very, very highly placed on my end of year list.
I also really enjoyed this. If you have a group that likes puzzles, if you have a group that has good vision and can solve color puzzles, then I think this is something I would definitely recommend for your group.
Get at it. Low Memory. Do it. Do it. After the fall of Rome, Europe entered into the Dark Ages, but with the rise of feudalism, prosperity returned to the area. In After the Empire, you are a medieval ruler trying to grow and defend your fiefdom.
Players will gather resources, build buildings, enlist troops, and recruit skilled refugees to both increase the value of their city and fortify its defenses against impending invaders.
Having a more valuable fiefdom yields greater rewards, but also brings more invaders looking to get their cut of what's yours. If they manage to sack, you will lose gold, your buildings will be damaged, and your refugees may be injured.
Whoever city is most prosperous at the end of the game is the winner of After the Empire. After the Empire is available for pre-order now from Grey Fox Games.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted.
Okay, so our 6-pack review this week is going to be Tapestry, which is a 2019 release from Stonemaier Games, which plays 1 to 5 players in 90 to 120 minutes. The designer is Jamey Stegmaier, and the artist is Andrew Bosley, with the sculptor being Rom Brown. In this game, the sculptor deserves a note.
Oh yeah.
This is a civilization game, or a game about civilizations.
I think that's an important distinction to make up front, where, this is talked about as a civilization game, but you think about civilization games as super big, heavy, complex, 3 to 4 hour, through the ages, or things like that kind of games. And Tapestry presents a game about civilizations from a different light. I do want to say up front, this was a review copy from Stonemaier Games. Important for us to point that out.
Yes.
It's because if that is important to you, that is important to you.
In Tapestry, each player is going to be playing their own civilization, and what this is manifested as is a group of boards that's in front of each player. You'll have your civilization board, which is your own special unique power that you're going to have. I think there's 16 in the game. You will have your capital city board, where you're going to be placing your buildings out in order to earn you points on every income turn, and also to get you some additional resources depending on how you fill that up. And you're going to have your central board. The central board has 3 separate spaces. It has a track where you keep track of your resources. If you've played any Stonemaier games before, you're familiar with this, where you don't actually get a token for every resource, you just mark it on a track. It's got a space where you're going to be playing your Tapestry cards on your income turns, and I'll get back to those in a minute. And it's got some tracks at the top, which as you take buildings off of them and place them onto your capital city board, are going to reveal more things that you get when you take income turns. Now, I've said income turns a number of times. That's because there are 2 types of turns in this game. It's comprised of 5 income turns, 1 at the beginning, 1 at the very end, and then 3 which will be spaced out between. On an income turn, you're going to be able to take the special power of your civilization. You'll play out a Tapestry card from your hand, which is a card you're going to get throughout the game, and it's going to inform this era of your civilization. It may give you 1 group of points or resources right away when you play it, or it may change the rules a little bit for this income phase of your game. Essentially, when you take an income turn, you are starting a new era, and that means that if you've played a Tapestry card that applies to that era, that rule is going to be in effect just for this 5th of the game, essentially, just for you, unless it says otherwise. Then you're going to take your income, which is going to be based on those tracks that I mentioned at the top of your central board. You may do some scoring in there, depending on what you have. And then you are going to take those resources that you've just earned and moved into the next era, which is going to be made up of advancement turns. And these are going to be most of the game. The advancement turns are going to be you spending the resources that you got on your income turn to move your tokens up on the 4 advancement tracks which are around the central board. The board has a map in the center of it, and 2 of the advancement tracks are largely based on that map. One of them, which is the exploration track, is going to be placing tiles out, so essentially creating the map. Another is the military track, which is going to be about taking control of the different hexes on the map. Now, that may be from just the map in general. You don't have to take control from another player, but you can also take control from another player. And that is actually very simple in this game. I'm sure we'll get to it in the discussion. The other 2 tracks are the technology track, which are going to allow you to take technology cards from a technology market, technology. And those will give you one-time bonuses when you upgrade them, which is something that you can do during your income turn and also at specific points on that technology track. And the science track, which is essentially going to allow you to manipulate your position on the other 3 tracks and either move up on them with or without taking the bonus, or maybe move down on them or take the action at the space you're on. Again, the science track is really about manipulating your position on the other tracks. Once you have run out of resources, you've used them all up, you've moved all your tokens up as far as you possibly can, then you have to take another income turn. And you're going to do all the steps of the income turn again. When you have to take your 5th income turn, that means that the game is over for you. You have done as much as you are going to do with your civilization. You will get any final points that you get from that last income turn. And then you will stop playing because the game is over for you. Since everybody is entering a new era at a different time when they run out of resources, other players may continue to take turns until they run out of resources and do everything that they're going to be doing. Once everybody has finished the 5th era, you are going to just see who has the highest score, and whoever has the highest score wins.
Wait, wins?
Wins.
Oh.
And that's how you play Tapestry.
Ta-da! Or at least I'll say on the surface level, that's how you play Tapestry, because so much of how you play Tapestry is all about the nuts and bolts and all the other weird little deeper stuff that we're going to get into in the rest of this. But we didn't want to bore you with, me talking for 9.5 to 25 minutes about how to play Tapestry with every possible tiny little rule. But as we do in a 6-pack review, I want to start out with talking about art and components. What a surprise. The art and components in this Stegmaier game are fantastic. Are you surprised?
I am not surprised, but I think they do deserve a little bit more discussion than that, because this game is not a cheap game, and the components are the reason why it is not, I wouldn't say that's why it's not a cheap game, but it is the reason why it's a $100 game.
Yeah, this is by far the most expensive retail MSRP Stegmaier game that there is on the market, and it comes with these 18 really nice pre-painted building miniatures. We mentioned in the early part that the sculpts were by this guy, Rom Brown. His name's on the front of the box as well, because a lot of the design decision in terms of how this game looks came because Jamey Stegmaier found Rom Brown's sculpting is like, wow, I love this, I love his style, and I want to do this thing. That's fantastic. And that really, inspired a lot of it. So these pre-painted sculpts are definitely going to be a part of the cost of the game. But frankly, I think they're super worth it. I think the game looks fantastic.
not only are the pre-painted sculpts really impressive, but each player is going to have 4 different types of what are called income buildings. And these are going to start on your central player mat that I talked about, and I said as you remove them, you're going to get more income on later income turns. Well, instead of just being a little wooden piece that you take off of that track and put onto your capital city board, each of them are a different type of sculpted house. There are 4 different colored and shaped types of little buildings that you're going to be placing out onto your central or your capital city mat. So it looks like a little city coming to life when you place these different buildings out onto it. They're not all the same, and it makes scoring a lot easier as well, because there are some things that'll give you points for each type of building. So if I need to know how many yellow buildings I have out, I can look and I see them. But they're all really cute little sculpts. They are very well done. Are they necessary? Absolutely not. If you wanted this game to be cheaper, it could have been made cheaper.
Yeah, this could have been a $60 game, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that they are absolutely necessary. They could have been any color of, like, just red cubes or whatever.
Yeah, they could have just been generic houses that didn't have a lot of detail to them, too.
I do feel like the quality that is in this game is awesome, and I enjoy having it, even though it wasn't necessary.
I feel like it also, had this game not been produced so lavishly, it wouldn't have been a Stegmaier game. That's kind of always been a hallmark of him. Obviously, even Scythe, with the retail edition of Scythe, it still has fantastic art and a big box, and you get those mechs, the plastic miniature mechs. And it's kind of always been the way that he does his games and the way Stegmaier games does. Again, was it necessary? No, but super nice, and I'm not going to say no to it.
I also do want to mention the texture on the mats, because I know, people have been weird about the texture on some of the stuff. I'm specifically thinking of the Wingspan rulebook.
Yeah.
If you remember the way that the Wingspan rulebook sort of had that really texturized feel to it, all the cardboard boards for your player setup, your civilization board, your central board, your capital city mat, they're all going to be really texturized. So if that for some reason freaks you out, know that it's coming.
Or if that's the kind of thing you really like, then you can just sit there kind of just touching your boards all day.
Yeah.
Touching the boards.
One thing I do want to say is that texture does keep stuff from sliding around. Like, even when I bumped my board, or my hair decided to take a swath through the middle of my capital city, which has definitely happened a couple of times, the little rubber buildings stay nice on the textured cardboard.
Well, good.
For what that's worth.
And also, in terms of the art, Andrew Bosley does a fantastic job with this, and I do really appreciate, the civilization cards are huge. The card didn't need to be huge, but it's like a good 5x8 for these civilization cards. And your big central card, your tapestry cards, everything is full color, just giant illustration everywhere. And I think that really contributes to the feel of this game being premium, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. In terms of art and components, there's one other thing that I want to say. This game is huge, and it feels like it's bigger than a lot of games that I'm used to playing of this kind of depth and heaviness. We've had to really squeeze this into a lot of places, because you've got this quite big board for the central board with all the the tracks and the landmass and everything, and then everybody's got a good maybe 20 inches of personal player board there. It's a lot. It's a lot of space.
Yeah, and I don't think much of it could have been much smaller, because you do have that civilization card, and you did say those were probably bigger than they absolutely needed to be, but they do have quite a bit of text on them, and some of them have spaces to put either outposts or player cubes, so they do need a decent amount of space, and if you had had any art on them, they would have been about that size. Your central board is limited because you need to place a certain number of cards horizontally on it, so that couldn't have been much smaller, because then you wouldn't be able to place the cards. And the capital city board is limited because you have to be able to place the little income buildings onto it as well.
Yeah.
So you really couldn't have been able to make your player space much smaller. And you've got the side where you're putting all your technologies off to the side of your capital city board. It is a table hog. I will agree with you on that.
I feel like another publisher would have gone with mini size cards instead of full size cards for a lot of this stuff. And realistically, I'm not a graphic designer, so I don't know how you would have reformatted everything, but I'm sure somebody out there would have done much differently with the production of this and made it a little smaller just to, put it at that $60 price point. But again, that's not what you're getting into when you go after a Stegmaier Games release.
But But you are also paying $100 if you want this.
Yes. So, moving on, we often talk about learning and the learning curve. This is a game with an interesting kind of proposition because Jamey Stegmaier was incredibly proud of the 4-page rulebook for this game, which it is. It is 4 pages, and
I've been referring to it as the rule pamphlet.
yeah, it's a pamphlet. It's straight up 4 pages, and realistically, it does a decent job teaching you the game. I also watched Rodney's Watch It Played video because why would you not watch a Rodney if you have one? But another huge amount of this game is all of the different tracks and all of the different technology cards are on their own kind of 12 by 12 sheet that you're passing around the table. You get 2, you pass them around. Should this rule book have been longer is the question that I'm kind of asking.
I don't think we ever got to a point where we needed something to be in the rule book itself that wasn't there.
Yeah.
But I do feel like saying it's a 4-page rule book is a little bit of a cheat because in most rule books, those explanations of the spaces on the cards would have just been at the end.
Yeah.
So it's realistically
It's a 6-page
an
rule book.
8-page rule book. Oh, no.
I feel like the rule book gave me enough to learn and teach, and I feel like some of the kind of the edge cases came up as the game went on. We kind of just had to decide on our own. I don't remember a lot because it was really in games 1 and 2 where we're just like, well, it doesn't perfectly clearly state what this was, but then you kind of get a feel for the way the game is supposed to feel and the way the words feel, and it kind of emerges from there.
That kind of makes me want to point out the fact that there is definitely a learning curve on this game, even though every game is going to be different. And we'll talk about that when we get to variability, because that is a discussion we need to have with this game.
Oh, yeah.
After playing it 6 times, I definitely knew what I was doing way more in the 6th game than I did in the first game. And that's how you get it down to that 90 to 120 minute play point. Your first game or 2 of this is probably going to be closer to 150.
Oh, yeah. Let me pull up the numbers while you're talking.
Okay. I forgot you keep the numbers on how long the games we play are, but by the time we were playing this for our 6th game, we definitely had it down to really snappy turns. And even in a public place, there were a couple of times when folks came up to us and we were talking to it. We were definitely under 2 hours in our final game, which was a 3-player game. Mm-hmm. We've played this game at every player count except 1. Neither of us have played the solo game. How do you feel about the different player counts?
Different player counts matter in terms of where you have space on the board to me. Weirdly, 3 and 5 are the spots that I want to be.
I 100% agree.
2 was great for learning. And so our first game was a 2-player game. It was an hour 30. Our second game was 5 players at 2 hours and 9. And then that very last game, the 3-player game, was an hour 18. We really crushed it on that one. Good job, us and Daniel.
Okay, so the swing was a little bit less than I remembered, but it certainly felt really snappy in that last game.
Everything else was right around 2 hours, no matter what the player count. But I really like going back to it. Like 3 and 5 were the spots I wanted to play it. 2 felt open, and 4 felt weirdly open too. And I think it was just a combination of you and I had played, and the other 2 players had not. And we had a lot of space to move around, and there was less interaction.
Yeah, because there are 2 different sides of the board. There's a 2 and 3 player side of the board, which has obviously a smaller map area, and there's a 4 and 5 player side of the board, which has a larger map area, because it's important to have enough room for everybody to be able to do stuff. Largely because when you conquer a tile, you cannot move into a tile that has 2 pieces of plastic already on it. So if one person had control, somebody came in and conquered it, took over control, their piece of plastic stays on the map, it just lays down. So now nobody else can enter that space any longer. So you do need a bigger piece of the map for more players. But when you make that jump from 3 to 4, the amount bigger the map gets feels more than you needed, because it has to accommodate the 5 players as well. So I agree with you. Being at the top edge of the map allowance was definitely where I wanted to be. I would prefer this with 5 if the 5 players had all played before, because I do think that there's more availability for interaction. And I didn't mention them in the overview because they are a sort of one-time occurrence. There are some end-of-game goals that everybody is working towards that, there is one, I think, on both sides of the map for being the person to get to the center tile first, or for conquering 2 other player pieces, or for getting to the end of a track. And if you have the ability to interact a little bit more, you can get towards those end goals. So I like having more players in this game, but at the same time, if they don't know what they're doing, I'd rather play with 3 because otherwise the game is going to get really bogged down.
Yeah, another thing I was just thinking about is on the 3-player map, you only have 3 starting locations. Mm-hmm. On the 4 and 5 player map, there are 6 different starting locations. So even at 5 players, 2 players are going to have that empty kind of zone between them that if they want to, they can be non-aggressive and expand out towards it. I would honestly say, if I'm playing with people that know it well, I want to play with 3 just so you have kind of that forced interaction there. 4 players and 5 players, you're going to have empty space floating around that really kind of would give a player an advantage if they wanted to take it.
If they wanted to take
a
it.
slight bit of an advantage. But like, I'd rather, for the most part, expand out and just get a whole lot of conquer space on that empty zone if I could.
Oh, okay, but at the same time, that means you're giving up the points for taking over 2 spaces from another player, and I believe that's 15 points on the 4 and 5 player side of the map.
It is 15
It's
on that
15,
side.
10, 5 for the first 3 players that do it. 15 points in this game is not an insignificant amount of points. I'm not going to say it's going to win you the game, because it's obviously not. You're going to score, hopefully, at least 100 points. If you've not scored 100 points, I don't think you've done something correctly. It's happened, but if you're playing well, you should score at least 100 points. Now, you may score way, way more than that, but 15 points, even in a 100 to 200 point game, is not an insignificant swing.
I will say, asterisk, I don't understand how some of y'all are getting these 300 plus scores out there. Like, wow, teach me your ways. Please, teach me your ways.
I know one of the ways, and we'll get to that when we talk about variability.
Very true, very true. Okay, so moving into kind of gameplay proper, you've got a few different pieces here. You've got, obviously, the central board. You've got the 4 advancement tracks. You've got your own personal civilization with your capital city mat and your tapestry cards. Did anything feel like it was more important to you than anything else?
That depends on my setup, and that's going to be my answer for so much about this game.
Yeah.
At the beginning of each game, you get 2 different civilization cards, and you get to choose between them. I think you said there are 16 possible?
16 or 17, something like that, yeah. There's a lot.
That means that you are going to have a wildly different game, because those powers are very important for how your game plays. Some of them are going to give you a huge advantage at the beginning of the game. Most of them are going to give you something that goes on every income turn, and there are some that give you additional advantages throughout the game as you play. I'm thinking of the militarists, which as you place outposts out, you get additional bonuses. But there were definitely games where I relied on my civilization power more than other games. There were also games where I relied on my tapestry cards more than other games, because those tapestry cards are going to inform the way your game plays so very differently. You're going to play one during every income phase except the first and last one, I think. Just 2, 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
And they are going to give you probably, I think most of them are during this era. And they'll give you a different way to score points. And you may have more than one in your hand. And choosing the one that you have is often very impactful to how you're playing the game. Now, if you don't have a tapestry card in your hand, you do still play one. You just play the top one off the top of the deck. And if you can't plan for that, or if it doesn't really work with your strategy, then you don't really have to pay attention to that. And you've got to work on the other stuff. You've got to make sure you're moving up on those tracks. And you always have to maximize your resources. I feel like maximizing your resources is definitely the most important part of this game, no matter what. But what
more
else?
Resources is more turns.
Yeah. What else you lean into, though, I think largely depends on a bunch of different stuff, on your civilization and on your tapestry cards.
Yeah, swinging back to those tapestry cards, that's a pretty thick deck as well. I think there's maybe 40 or 60 different tapestry cards that you can get through in the deck.
There's enough we've never had to reshuffle them during a game.
And there's enough that even in Game 6, we've seen new cards that we've never seen before. Those cards are wildly, wildly variable. And this word's going to come up a lot. It is very unbalanced in a way, how wildly variable those tapestry cards are. What?
It can certainly feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, because maybe you got your 4th trap card in a row, which kind of sucks, but is good in one way. But maybe you got one that says anytime another player does this, you get extra crap. And that's super, super powerful. So those tapestry cards are wildly variable. There's all sorts of different stuff coming out of those. And it's a little surprising to me how much variability and unbalanced feel there is to those cards. And it really all comes down to how good you are at mitigating some random stuff that comes at you.
Yeah, and the situation you were referring to there was definitely a game we were playing where I was holding 4 trap cards in my hand and I had one on my board. And I couldn't for the life of me draw anything other than trap cards, which you can use trap cards to mitigate an attack that somebody is sending at you. It sort of cancels their attack and gives you a resource. But if you play them onto your central board, they just give you 10 points.
Yeah. Points are good, though.
Yeah, except in that game, I was playing with the civilization that allowed another player to, or I didn't have it. He had the civilization that allowed him to copy my one-time effects on my Tapestry cards.
Here's 10 free points.
So yeah, every time I gave myself 10 points, I also gave the player across from me 10 points. And it was really frustrating that I couldn't draw anything like that. But like, that was not my biggest problem with that game. My biggest problem with that game was another player had a civilization card, which we have removed from our pile of civilization cards available.
So I think it is actually, now would be the time. Let's swing over and talk about the civilizations. So like 16 or 17 civilizations, I feel like we've come to the understanding that there are some that are really good for players when they are starting out and getting a feel for the game. There are some that require you to really know the game well and understand how different pieces interact for you to make the best payout from them. And then the futurists also exist. But how do you feel about that being that variable? Sure, you get two, you get to pick one, but should there be any kind of balancing in that? Or are they balanced?
I will say the futurists are the one that we have removed from our pile of civilizations. Their special power is that they start the game not only with an extra one of each of the resources, but they start 4 spaces up on each of the advancement tracks. And they don't get any of those benefits, but they are 4 spaces farther along. And not only does that mean that they get to better rewards quicker, and they start with more resources, so they are sort of equipped to take those higher jumps. As you move along each of the tracks and enter each of the quarters of those tracks, moving up becomes more expensive. So the first 3 spaces on each track cost 1 random resource. The second 3 spaces cost 1 resource of the type associated with that track plus a random resource. 7 through 9 are 1 random or 2 random resources plus 1 associated with that track, and then the last 3 are 2 that are associated with that track only. So there is more of a targeted and higher value cost to moving up on those later things, but they start with more resources, so they're equipped to do that. And not only does that mean that they're getting better stuff sooner, but it means that they have essentially free reign on some of those buildings that you get from moving up the track that are placed onto your center city, which are going to give you more resources and more points every time you score them. It felt like too many advantages, and we played with them a couple of times, and nobody was ever even able to come close. So at this point, until we find a strategy that feels like it could come anywhere near that, we've taken them out of our game.
Yeah, there's actually a thread on BGG that's just titled, "Let's Talk About the Futurists." I guess, in a way, I'm really glad that there's 16 or 17 civilizations in there, because then one of them being that one that we're just like, no, we're not going to play with this anymore. This is insane. Or at least having that as, hey, this is an option for somebody completely new to this game. We'll give them the futurists so they can kind of catch up with us. It's nice that it exists for that, but just like, put an asterisk or something on that one, man, because like, wow.
Yeah, that one was, at least in our group, we felt like it was too much of an advantage. Now, that being said, nothing else felt like that much of an advantage. So the rest of them, while they were wildly different, and I agree with you, some of them were way easier than others. The Merrymakers, for example, you just get bonus stuff every income phase. Some of them are like groups of large amounts of points. So you could just take that and boost that up every time, and you get 5 points the first time you do it, 10 points the second time, 15 the third time. Yeah. And you also have the option of taking resources if that's what you need. Those are just really easy. You just get free stuff. There were others that have more to do with the interaction between players. So I give you a token, and every time you get something, I get something because I've given you this token. But maybe I give you the token, and the player to your left is the one that does all the thing that I need. And I'm like, oh, dang. That's a little bit more of a medium thing. And there are some, like I think you had the Nomads, that are a little bit more tricky to figure out how to get the points out of that. But nothing that was so wild that we were like, oh my God, that's got to get out of here.
Yeah, then the Nomads was a really interesting one. It's the only one that I've seen, or one of the only reasons that you would ever place your income buildings and landmark buildings onto the center map instead of in your particular city, center city board. And that was really interesting. I wish I had gotten, or I want to play that one again, because I feel like I understood, it took me like 2/3 of the game to understood how to do that one powerfully. And there's a lot of really cool things that you learn as you play this game, but it is the kind of game that you have to come in saying, all right, you know what? This game is going to happen, and things are going to come out of this game. I'm not going to have complete control over this because of the way my Tapestry cards come out, because of the way everybody will roll the Conquer dice, and there's just going to be a lot of kind of uncertainty in this game. That's not a bad thing, and I feel like the game doesn't outstay its welcome. But like in the last game we played, the one where I was playing the Nomads, we finished it in an hour 20. I finished maybe 1 or 2 turns before anybody else. It is by far the lowest score I've ever had in a game of this because I felt like I was just never able to get my feet under me. And I think this has been one of the frustrating points that you talked about as well, is that if you don't have a really good start and you don't get like if you use the science die and you go up the wrong track and you miss a Tapestry card, or maybe you step over a Conquer space that you didn't want to, you just you're like, well, crap. I mean, I got to figure out a way to make this thing work now.
Yeah, and I said that when we were playing some of our earlier games. As we got to our later games, I got a little bit better of leaving myself in a position where if I had to use a science die, or I had a power at one point that made me roll the science die on my income turn, and I move up on the spaces that I roll on the die unless I roll something I've already rolled. I think it was the architects or something that. I was better at leaving myself in a position where I didn't get absolutely hosed by that, but I do feel like it can feel, if you don't know what you're doing early in the game, you can feel like you never really get rolling in the way that the other players do. Mm-hmm. But I feel like playing it a bunch helps with that. So I'm not as hard on that as I originally was when we were playing the first and second game. That being said, if we hadn't been committed to playing 6 games of it, I'm not entirely sure I would have been really excited to play it again after those second and third games, because I was just feeling real rough about myself, which is just me being a mopey pain in the butt, but whatever.
Well, I'll say, I don't understand how I did so poorly in that last game. And that's one of the things that frustrates me about a game like this, is that I don't know what I did to make myself have a really poor game that game, other than I rolled the science die at the wrong time or something like that. I feel like that's kind of one of those questions that I want to answer in a game like this. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of variability. I want to know, what did I do wrong to put myself in such a bad position? Because then I can come back and play a next game and be like, oh, I'm totally going to go straight in on this. And maybe that's kind of what it is. Maybe you really, with some civilizations, need to choose to go all in on one of the tracks and really just push at it. And I do really appreciate that the tracks are long enough that you don't get to the end of them all the time. In fact, honestly, very rarely are we getting to the end of any of the tracks. We'll have games here and there where one player will get to one, or maybe we'll have a game where 3 or 4 players get to the end of one of the tracks. But it's not like every single game, everybody's maxing out everything. So the games do continue to feel different enough. So that's a positive.
Yeah, I would not think that you'd play a game that felt exactly the same of this if you played it a reasonable number of times. If you played it an excessive number of times, good for you. I'm glad you got your enjoyment out of a lot of money that you spent on this game. But if you're playing it the amount of times that most game groups will play something, even if you're playing it, let's say a lot, 20 times a year, that's a lot for most board gamers. People don't have a ton of time.
I don't think of a game that I've played 20 times.
I know. I wasn't talking about you. I said most people.
It was kind of our job.
But you're not going to have the same game, because in that, you're going to have maybe 3 or 4 different civilizations every time. You're going to see different Tapestry cards. I feel like they're all going to feel kind of different. And the interaction is going to cause a substantial change in the way that you're going to play this game. Mm-hmm. So I guess the question that we have to ask with any game is this fun? Do you have fun with it?
Yeah, I have fun playing Tapestry.
I also have fun playing Tapestry, although I feel like if you're going to get hung up on winning this game, you won't have fun.
Yeah.
Because there are certainly combinations of cards that you may draw that just don't work with your civilization, or your civilization is not working with the current state of the way things are rolling. And I feel like if you have to win every game that you think you did your absolute best at, that's going to be rough in this game. There is too much that you can't really control to be able to say that you need to be able to win every time you play your best. Now, I have lost a lot of games, most of them against you, a lot of them against Tamara. And I can look at it and be like, you know what? I had fun telling the weird story of this civilization where we were doing all these terrible things, and then we went through suddenly a dark ages and everybody forgot, or we went through a revisionist period and suddenly everything's different, and then we just have one happy era. Like, I enjoy that, and I thought it was fun, but this game didn't do I'm going to steal a phrase from the Dukes of Dice, is I wouldn't say this game was a game that made me feel clever every time I played it. There were definitely times it did.
Yeah.
Like, there
okay.
are memories that I have where I set myself up exactly perfectly to use something that I played out of my hand, and I felt like I did a really good job. But there were also times where I was like, oh, this happened. It was bad.
Yeah, I definitely had turns in this game where I'm just like, oh, this is the perfect set of stuff. Or maybe a turn where I'm just like, I move up on this and I draw an outer space tile and I'm like, oh, these do this? I can do this. And that allows me to, take this step. There are moments of being really clever and feeling good. But at the same time, some of the turns I'm just like, well, whomp, whomp, I guess I get this card, which is fine. It's not the best thing in the world, but it doesn't diminish from me having fun with the game. And honestly, one thing I do appreciate about this is that it's a civilization game that doesn't take 4 hours.
Well, because it's not really a civilization game, is it?
Yeah, no, it's a game about civilizations, but
Yeah.
it's not your typical civilization building game.
It does not have as many individual, like, little tweakable dials and things in your civilization that you can do. You can't tailor everything exactly the way you might in a bigger, longer, more involved civilization game. But it is a game about civilizations, and you do get that feeling of your civilization evolving as you use your power more on the income turns. You can feel like, oh, I've invested in this particular way of life and I'm seeing these rewards from it. And as you play those Tapestry cards out, it does create a narrative where, okay, maybe this happened, and you do occasionally laugh. You're like, oh, you're an oil baron. You haven't invented writing, but you're an oil baron. Cool. It's fun, and it does tell a story, which I think is important, because if this game didn't feel like it was telling the story of a civilization, it might not be as fun.
All right, so final thoughts time. I'll start out. For me, Tapestry is a weird beast. I feel like this is going to be the most divisive of Jamey Stegmaier's designs. People that love it are going to love it. People that hate it are going to hate it. But it's got a bunch of really interesting pieces in it. It doesn't play like a civilization game that you expect, but it plays like a game that tells a fun story and has some moments of being really smart. I love the advancement tracks. I think they're a really interesting way to handle civilizations. There's a lot of the Stonemaier DNA in this of, moving up on tracks and paying resources to get cool benefits, stuff like that. The production is exceptional. It's what you expect from a Stonemaier game. It is a wildly expensive game in terms of a game of this weight. I enjoy it. I was ready to spend $80 on it. Even if Jamey hadn't sent us one, I would have spent $80 in the pre-order period, which sold out in 36 hours, which is insane. And in a way, it kind of makes me feel bad that Jamey Stegmaier is never going to have a normal game release ever again.
I think he'll be okay.
Yeah, he'll be fine. But Tapestry is an interesting game. I feel like everybody should play it. But whether or not it's for you comes down to how much you want to win a game and how much you want to understand a game versus how much you want to just play a game and do some weird, fun stuff. Because Tapestry does some weird, fun stuff. And I've never felt sad playing a game of Tapestry or dumb.
I've occasionally felt dumb.
I guess that's true. Sometimes I feel pretty dumb about rolling the science die when I shouldn't.
I've really enjoyed this game, and there are definitely a bunch of things in it that I thought were a really fun time. I've wanted to play it every time we brought it out, but I do feel like it is a big ask for this game. It's $100 MSRP, it's $90 online pricing that's currently listed. Even if you got it at that $80 pre-order price point, which you can't do now because it was in the past, and you can't, unless you can, in which case...
That's not how time works.
Maybe somebody can. But it's a lot of money, which you're getting back in the production value. But for a game that has so much variability and a little bit of randomness, like you are sometimes beholden to what you draw, I think that that's a call you're going to need to make on your own, whether or not you can say that you're going to invest this much money in a game that is very pretty, but that can have very different play experiences. If you think that your group is going to have a fun time, this is the absolute nicest, prettiest way that you can play a sort of lighter civilization game. And it's not a light game, but it is definitely at heaviest a medium weight game, at very heaviest. And if this is something that you're willing to invest in, it's going to show the money you spent on it, but it is a lot of money. That being said, I had fun playing it. So I'm not going to go out and say like, oh, you definitely shouldn't buy this game because it's a lot of money. If I don't control your money. I mean, if you're not Jake, I don't have any say in how you spend your money. So it really comes down to, do you want to see what this is? Do you want to have this sort of random, swingy, different fun? And do you have that in your hobby budget? If you do, I think you should play this. I think it's a fun time. But I'm not going to absolutely say you need to go out and buy it. This is not like Escape Tales Low Memory where I was like, it's going to be less than 40, 50 bucks. Go get this immediately. Duh, go get this. This is a call everybody's going to have to make on their own. And I think that's where it sits for me.
Yeah. And frankly, if you want to play it, just come to one of our game nights or Mega MooseCon.
Yeah. I mean, unless you don't live here. There are lots of people who don't live here.
Yes, but there are 25,000 people in the first print run of this game, so you can probably find somebody with a copy of Tapestry if you want to go play it.
True.
All right, well, that wraps up our thoughts on Tapestry, except for these thoughts that are about beers. Coming back right after the break, we're going to pick some beers for it. Well, rather, Danielle did, and I'm going to say some of the words.
We're going to put it on tap.
Yeah, on tap. That's what we call this. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. All right, well, here we go with an on tap for Tapestry. It's a 2019 release from Stonemaier Games, 1 to 5 players, 90 to 120 minutes, designed by Jamey Stegmaier, art by Andrew Bosley, sculpts by Rom Brown, in case you forgot those things. Should I go with the first beer?
Yeah.
All right, first off, from Ratschern Brewery in Hamburg, Germany, we have the New Era Pilsner Dry Hopped. It's a Pilsner at 4.9% ABV and 32 IBU. The notes for this beer were in German, so I plugged them into Google Translate, and now you get that. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Unmistakable, our Dry Hopped unfolds its unique personality with the best hop varieties from both sides of the Atlantic. Even smelling, you think you are near lemon trees and berry bushes. Extremely fresh and slightly dry. Just as we imagine a perfect Pils.
Did you not get the pop-up on their website where you could translate everything into English?
Nope, I did not go to their website. I got that off on Untapped.
Ah, okay.
Untapped.com, without the E for savings. I don't know.
They had a couple of different versions of their New Era Pilsner. The dry hopped one was the one that was most prevalent, it looked like. So this is something they've got a couple of different versions of. I think they were mostly with different hops, but it looked very tasty.
You too could be near lemon trees and berry bushes.
I'd love to be near lemon trees and berry bushes.
Danielle, next beer.
Next up, from Mellow Mink Brewing in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, we have Raspberry and Passion Fruit Tapestry, which is a fruited sour, 5.1% ABV, 2 IBU. It is a blended golden sour aged in Chardonnay barrels, then re-fermented on raspberries and passion fruit. It is naturally carbonated and conditioned in the bottle.
I like it.
And this one is available from their tap room in bottles currently. They do a couple of different Tapestry beers, which are different fruited sours, but this is the one that is currently available if you are in the Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania area. Mellow Mink looked like a pretty cool place. Next time we're up there, I kind of want to give them a visit.
Cool. Make it happen. Next up, from Bad Dad Brewing Company in Fairmount, Indiana, we have Tapestry of Obscenity. It's an American IPA, 6.6% ABV, and the notes that I got off on tap for this one were, and I quote, "Hops so smooth and citrusy, you won't bleeping believe it."
I think this is a little bit funny because if there's one word I do not associate with Stonemaier Games, that's obscenity.
Yeah,
but there are definitely moments where I drew a Tapestry card and I was like, that is not the card I needed. Except I didn't say it like that. So there are moments when you will absolutely just get hosed.
I don't need another trap.
Yeah, that one. That one is fair.
Yeah.
Also, Tapestry is the word that most people use for their sour beers that they brew once. So I didn't want to give you guys a bunch of beers that you can never ever get again. This one is a regularly available canned. I think they're 16-ounce cans. This is their core lineup. So it may not be a perfect fit, but it is something that you can get.
Perfect.
Our final beer is going to be from Bramari Brewing Company in Asheville, North Carolina, and it is called Painted Fortune because this game has absolutely beautiful pre-painted minis, and that's why it costs a fortune. It's a California Common, which is 5.8%, 16 IBU, and it is crisp and complex with notes of caramel and sweet corn and subtle dark cherry notes on the finish. It is inspired by California and Kentucky common beers, styles of beers that were popular before modern refrigeration technology, and the commons are fermented at high temperatures like ales, but aged for very short times before they were served. If you've ever had a common beer, it's got a little bit of depth that you don't necessarily expect from something that's not been, like, really long aged. So I think this is a good one to give a try.
All right. For more information on these and other beers that we've paired with other games in the past, you can go to draftmechanic.net and click show notes at the top for more information.
You can also just go to Untapped and become my Untapped friend, or even not become my Untapped friend and just look at the lists, because all the lists are available on there as well.
Aren't the lists friends only?
Only until the episode goes up.
Very well. Do that. You can do that and stuff. All right. Moving on. Let's hop into the beer segment. Yes, I did it. Go ahead. Carry on.
So a while back, I had put a poll up on our guild asking if people would be interested in a bunch of beer segments about hops, and the overwhelming answer was yes. So after that, we talked a little bit about hop cultivation, but we're going to start in earnest on it this episode. We're going to talk about the 3 things that hops generally add to beer. Those 3 things are alpha acids, beta acids, and essential oils. And those can be divided into 2 groups. Unsurprisingly, alpha and beta acids kind of work the same way. Essential oils work a different way. Alpha acids and beta acids are produced by hops that are added to the boil. They're thrown in and they're left in there for a long time, like up an hour up additionally. If you look at like Dogfish had 60-minute, 90-minute, and 120-minute. That's how long the hops are in the boil for. And that is to get the alpha and beta acids out of the hops and into the wort. When they're in the boil, alpha acids are going to produce most of the bittering, but beta acids also add to that bittering as well. Alpha acid resins can be made soluble in water through a process called isomerization, and once they have been isomerized, they're called isoalpha acids. This is not surprising, that's how words work. The primary alpha acids that you're going to find in beer are humulone, cohumulone, and adhumulone. These alpha acids are going to be expressed in a percentage of the weight of the hop flower. So if you've got a low percentage hop and you add more of it, you're going to get slightly more bitter beer. If you've got the same amount of hops, but you have a higher percentage of the alpha acids, you're also going to get more bitter beer because it's got more alpha acids that are going to be isomerized into the beer. Once the alpha acids are in the beer, they're obviously going to make it more bitter, but they're also going to combine with riboflavin and B vitamins in the beer, and at that point, if they're exposed to light, that's what's going to lead to skunking. If you've got beer that's in clear glass bottles or green bottles particularly, that lets light in a lot more than brown bottles, so that's why a lot of breweries try not to use them, because that alpha acid and B vitamin combination can lead to really, really off flavors. Beta acids, like I said, also contribute to the bittering of the beer, but they don't undergo isomerization, so they don't become more soluble. They only add to the bittering once they undergo oxidation. And actually, they can change in flavor as the beer is aged for longer amounts of time. The primary beta acids are lupulone, colupulone, and adlupulone. In addition to bittering, both alpha and beta acids contribute to the antiseptic quality of the beer, so it makes it a less hospitable environment for the growth of bacteria and a more hospitable environment for the growth of the yeast. And that's what gives beer a lot of its shelf life, is the antiseptic quality of the hops. The hops that are added for alpha and beta resin are called bittering hops because that's what you get from alpha and beta acid. You get bitterness. You don't get hop aroma and flavor. That comes from the essential oils, which are provided from hops. And those hops are added at the end of the boil, the last 5 to 10 minutes or so, or dry hopping after the wort has been taken out and is fermenting and chilling out. The reason that you don't get the essential oils from the bittering hops is because essential oils are really volatile and they'll evaporate off with the steam during the boil, so you don't get any of the aroma and the flavor from the bittering hops. The essential oils have to be added in right at the end. That's what's going to provide your grassy, piney, earthy, citrusy, and spicy notes that you get. Anything you associate with hop flavor, other than just straight bitterness, is going to come from those essential oils. The primary hop essential oils are humulene, which is very notable in noble hops, myrcene, which is high in American hops and creates the citrus and pine aromas, and caryophyllene, which adds a lot of spicy flavor. And I'll talk about a few more of the hop odors that you're going to get from different essential oils a little bit. While most essential oils are hydrocarbons, like the ones I just mentioned, a small percentage of them are sulfur compounds, which are called thiols, and these have a very low perception threshold, so even a little bit of them can greatly influence beer. And it will be a little bit of a risk putting those sulfur compounds in there because people perceive them a little bit more differently than some of the hydrocarbon essential oil flavors. So one of the things that I saw a smell being perceived as was like tomcat pee. I'm like, I don't want my beer to smell like that. But that's the sulfur compounds that can be detected at a very, very low threshold. If you can determine what essential oil is driving a particular flavor, then you can tailor the way that the hops are grown and cultivated to get that particular flavor profile, which they had recently found out which essential oils led to the passion fruit flavor that you get from a lot of citra hops and stuff like that. So they're able to change the way they're cultivating the hops and cultivate hops in a more tailored direction for people, which is A, great for the farmers because they're getting more sales of stuff that they want, and B, it means we get good tasty beers that are, in what people are trying to buy right now. So I said I would mention some hop odor compounds to know. So please forgive the butchering of science words I'm about to do.
Science!
Caryophyllene, which is one of the essential oils, leads a woody flavor. Citronellol is citrusy and fruity. Farnesene is a floral type of essential oil. Geraniol is a floral and rose and geranium kind of smell. Humulene is woody and piney, like I said. Limonene is citrusy and orangey. Obviously, it's limonene. Linalool is floral and orange as well. Myrcene is sort of a green, resinous, piney smell. Nerol is rose and citrus. Pinene is spicy and piney. They didn't really put a lot of effort into that one.
Oh, it's piney.
3-mercaptohexanol.
Yeah.
Is guava and tropical flavors. Everything's about guava nowadays. 3-mercaptyl acetate is sort of a muscat passion fruit
There is no
flavor.
way that this last one is a real name of a thing, right?
I mean, it's a science word. It's 4-mercapto-4-methylpentan-2-1, which apparently was important enough that was mentioned in the article that was giving me this information. And I will definitely link to this article because there's no way that you were able to write that down.
I'm going to call it curantolene.
It's blackcurrant and tropical flavors. So I will definitely link to that. But those are just some of the essential oils that hops produce and that give it the different flavors and aromas that you get out of your beer. Right. So those are the two different things that the different hops are going to be contributing. Bitterness and the aromas and flavors, obviously. And as we go forward and talk about different varieties of hops, these are why there are the differences that there are. And obviously, hops are a natural thing. Any hop varietal is going to have variation within the plants of that species. But I think it's interesting to sort of know where we're coming from. And as we go forward with this hops series that I really hope to continue on, this is the basic information that you're going to need to sort of understand what's happening.
Cool. Well, everybody out there, please go to the show notes section of draftmechanic.net, and you too can click on links to see that information.
I'm sorry, science people.
All right, well, after the break, we're going to come back with our final round and talk about balance. I wonder why that one came up after this episode. All right, we'll be right back. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. All right, inexplicably, I decided to make this the final round question of this particular episode of Draft Mechanic. If you are interested, by the way, you can definitely join our Slack channel, totally free to sign up, and I fixed the link. You just go to draftmechanic.net/Slack or go to draftmechanic.net, click the Slack button, and then you click on the button, and then you have Slack, and then you're there, and you can talk with us about board games and beer and the good stuff. But here's the question that I posed to our Slack channel. Does every game have to be balanced? When is it okay for a game to not be balanced or for a game to be unbalanced? So we had some responses, which is great because I put this up literally 24 hours ago. Stewie says, this question has me backflipping and countering myself because I love so many games for so many different reasons. Overall, no. A game doesn't need to be balanced, but it does need to be achievable and close. That feeling of, quote, if only, we could have won. Games that keep it challenging are fantastic, and I love trying out new strategies. Games that come to mind are Eldritch Horror or Betrayal at House on the Hill. Like when the haunt happens and a team is up against the odd and wins. It creates great moments. I also enjoy games that are balanced enough that the strategy comes down to what cards or moves I make against your cards or moves. Games such as Terraforming Mars and Hanamakoji, for me, are balanced, and I really enjoy those too. So yes, but no, but closer to yes.
Crystal from Board Game Blitz says, no, most don't. For a number of reasons. I believe that a lot of the fun, excitement, and tension in certain games is contributed to by a seeming lack of balance. Especially for thematic games. If a lack of balance adds to the game's experience or makes it more fun, I think it's awesome. I think it can also help level the playing field. In a perfectly balanced game, the only variables are the players themselves. Therefore, the more experienced or skilled player is going to win every time. Sometimes that's okay, but it can also become very frustrating and unenjoyable for others. Which is fair. I mean, yeah, if you're going to play with somebody who wins all the time...
You're playing with Tara.
Or you.
I don't win that much. All right, Jeff says, I think a game should be designed with balance in mind, but have strategic combos that allow for some swings in scoring due to a well-planned out strategy. Some people call this optimization or spreadsheeting. I like the puzzle. I would use Terraforming Mars, Ganz Schön Clever, and actually Tapestry. I can't stop playing. Please help.
Nate Bivens said, I'll paraphrase the great Peter Olatka, designer of Cosmic Encounter. Balance is for wimps. Certain types of games need balance. Longer games typically benefit from it. It's a central component of most Euros, especially heavier ones. But do Mansions of Madness or Battlestar Galactica need to be perfectly balanced? Of course not. For me, fairness is a more important word when designing than balance.
I like that. The word fairness makes a lot of sense, especially going back to the conversations we had earlier about Tapestry. I felt it was a fair game. There's just all sorts of stuff happening.
Well, yeah, because everybody was subject to the same randomness.
Everybody's got to roll that science dice eventually. All right. As is tradition, Patrick Hillier has the final word of the last round. The last word of the final round? You know, this part, where I talk about Patrick. Does balance mean all players have a reasonable chance of winning? Then I think yes. Sure, things like skill and random events can throw this off. This does mean games can be asymmetric in balance, such as Blood of an Englishman or Raptor. There are also games with variable player powers, such as Terraforming Mars, and through repeat plays, I've managed to learn to win with all of them, even if some seemed unbalanced at first. Maybe that's the real answer, is that the powers were the ones we learned along the way, playing Terraforming Mars a lot.
Well, nobody plays Terraforming Mars as much as Patrick.
I'm pretty sure he is the most terraformed man in the world.
But, I mean, he does bring up a very good point. If you played something enough times, I'm sure that...
Yeah, you can learn how to win with pretty much any civilization.
Yeah, it can be balanced.
Yeah.
But getting to that point may be a longer haul in some cases than in others. Which is probably what we are experiencing with some of those powers.
Yeah. Well, if you have thoughts that you would like to share, come and join us in the Slack channel or just tweet them at us. You can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or boardgames.beer, which is a website that I paid for and is just renewed. On social media, we are at Draft Mechanic on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and those are the places. Oh yeah, draftmechanic@gmail.com. We have that email address as well that you can do that.
We also have a board game guild that is guild number 2470, and there, again, will be a thread up for this so you can talk about whether you think games need to be balanced.
Hooray.
If you're in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, our next local game night is going to be on Thursday, November 7th at Good Road Cider Works, but we'd love to see you at Mega Moose Con, which is coming up this coming weekend as of when we're releasing.
Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Visit greyfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Anything else?
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Sounds like a good deal. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 112 was recorded on Sunday, October 20th in front of a live studio cat. There, I got it after 5 tries.
Is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey out there in podcast land, this is Brian, and I just wanted to invite you to check out my tabletop game review and preview video channel, Cloak and Meeple. There, I check out a lot of Kickstarter games, as well as sneak in some fresh reviews of published games. Come and check out all of the bad acting in my attempts to be entertaining in my intros. Stay for a game overview and hear my thoughts of the game at the very end. You can find Cloak and Meeple on YouTube at youtube.com/cloakandmeeple.
Punchboard Media, where we all
Bring something
to the table
pull up a chair
at punchboardmedia.com.